Hi guys, welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Michael Monsa Lioba. Today we are looking at audit and assurance services, particularly looking at internal controls. What would we understand by the term internal controls? The definition. The Institute of Internal Auditors defines internal controls as a process designed and effected by those charged with governance and management and other personnel to provide reasonable assurance about the achievement of entities' objectives with regard to reliability of financial reporting, effectiveness, efficiency of operations, and compliance with applicable laws and regulations. So from this definition, we may take it that it involves a whole system of controls, either financial or otherwise, whose objective is to safeguard the assets of an entity, secure as far as possible the compliance, management compliance to policies, and also to look at having the right attitude, awareness, and as well actions of those charged with governance and management of an entity. So that's what internal control is all about. Now let's look at this internal control in terms of what it means or what value it has to both the external auditor and the internal auditor. For an external auditor, the external auditor need to get an understanding of both the internal and financial operating system of an entity in order to plan properly or adequately for an audit. For an external auditor, he needs to carry out a review of the accounting and recording system to determine the nature of the audit, to be undertaken, and also to discharge his responsibility under Section 237 of the Companies Act of 1985 to form an opinion on the adequacy of the accounting records. For the internal auditor, on the other side, he needs to review, or she needs to review this accounting and recording system to assess its adequacy to produce information that is complete, adequate, and authentic. So that's what we look at in terms of accounting system as it relates to both external auditor and internal auditor. On the other side, we've talked about the need to look at an operating system. The auditor will review the operating system basically to assess its effectiveness. When we talk about effectiveness, we are looking at the ability of this particular operating system to produce the desired results that will go towards meeting the set objectives of the entity. Secondly, this review will enable this auditor to assess its efficiency. Again, in this regard, when we look at efficiency, we are talking about output relation to input. So we want to make sure that the system does optimize on the benefits derived from the measure of input that is pushed in. Input can be in form of resources, can be in form of time, and other elements of that nature. So that's how we are looking at efficiency. The third point, and the operating system, which is of concern to the auditor, is to assess the economy, its economy. When you talk about economy, the auditor is particularly concerned with the cost for carrying out a particular activity, a process, or any action that is pertaining to this particular entity under investigation. So we make sure that, or the auditor will make sure that the cost of carrying out a task is not more than what it's supposed to cost. Then we say that particular operation or that particular system is economical. The management requires to ensure that there is complete and authentic accounting records to make sure that these particular accounting records are going to be used effectively to control the business, to safeguard the assets, prepare financial statements, and comply with legislation. Now, there are other factors that impact on the internal controls. Okay, depending on the size and nature of the accounting system, you find that there will be need to frequently look at internal controls to ensure that all transactions have been recorded. Okay, also errors or irregularity in processing have become apparent, and assets and liability recorded actually do exist and are recorded at the correct amount. So that's how this particular aspect is also of importance in relation to internal control. So let's look at methods of recording accounting records. There are three methods used commonly to record the internal control system, and these are in the nature of narrative notes. We also have flowcharts. We also have checklists. Now, when you're talking about narrative notes, we are talking about written or word processed, okay, to actually capture what the internal control system is all about. This particular method has its own advantages and disadvantages. One of the advantages is that it clearly explains what an internal control system is all about, and also it is normally using a communication module or communication system that we are all very familiar with, or the language that is very familiar with, so that the end user does not get misled. So that's some of the advantages that narrative notes provide. On the flip side, the disadvantages can include one, it not being suitable for a very big and complex system, okay, and also it might take a lot of space to describe a system, and this becomes uneconomical. When we look at the next one, which is a flowchart, okay, the method of recording an internal control system by flowchart, we are talking about this being a diagrammatic representation of the system, usually broken down in separate activities, using symbols or standard symbols. It has also its own merits and demerits. One of the advantages could be that a flowchart, these standard symbols might not be exhaustive of all activities that are taking place in an organization. Secondly, a flow chart requires a technical experience and expertise to draw them. Okay, and this particular technical experience ensures that the system recorded is not misleading. On the disadvantage part, you find that on the advantage part, rather, I talked about those two as disadvantages. On the advantage part, we talk about a flowchart gives a snapshot of the system which can be understood at a glance. Okay, snapshot of activities that in the particular entity that can be seen at a glance. The other advantage is that it actually can be compressed on one page so that the whole system can easily be understood from one page, so it is economical. On the third method, we're talking about checklists or questionnaires. In this particular case, you find that an audit firm, for instance, will have a standard list of control questionnaires. The audit staff can quickly ascertain which, if any, are in operation by client. And there are two types of internal controls. There is internal control questionnaire and internal control evaluation questionnaire. The internal control questionnaire just helps auditors to identify which internal controls are in place in an entity system, whereas internal control evaluation questionnaire does go further to establish whether those internal control present in the system are actually working or not working appropriately. So how effective are they? So you assess what value they are adding to the system. I have also included specimen checklist questions relating to the two questionnaires that you are likely to find, just to amplify on this particular questionnaire. By way of example, I have the first example, which relates to internal control questionnaire question. You find questions like, does the credit controller check the credit worthiness of the customers prior to dispatch of goods? So as I said, internal control questionnaires just do help to identify whether particular internal controls are in the system or applied or exist in this particular entity. Whereas the second example of internal control evaluation questionnaire, you have questions like, can goods be dispatched to a customer who is a proper check credit, who has a poor credit risk? Okay, so in this particular case, you want to find out whether it's possible, okay, it's possible to assess whether this particular control actually is working properly or not. So if there's goods cannot be checked, goods which are dispatched cannot be checked as to whether the customer to whom they are destined has got a poor credit risk or not, then we can say that this internal control, although it is existing, it might be said to be weak. Okay, so you use an internal control evaluation questionnaire to assess whether maybe an internal control is weak or strong. Okay, so that's how it is done. Okay, so we look at how does the auditor confirm the system? How does the auditor confirm the system in operation? The auditor will confirm the system normally by carrying out what is known as a walkthrough test. A walkthrough test. This walkthrough test is where the auditor does follow a particular transaction from cradle to grave, meaning that from the start to finish. This involves following more transactions of each type through the accounting system to confirm that the system has been documented properly, starting from the beginning to the end, more like saying from alpha to omega. Okay, so that's what is done to confirm the system. Secondly, the auditor must even evaluate the system. He will do this by making reference to the presence or absence of internal controls. Okay, so in the due process, okay, of carrying out a particular activity by an entity, we expect to find intermittently points where checks are done. You need to find what can be said to be internal checks. Okay, these are systems of controls placed at an appropriate point so that we ensure the credibility of processing is actually guaranteed. So that's what is done. Then we look at the third way of comparing the system. In the confirmation of the system, there is evaluation of controls determining the type of audit test to be performed. Okay, to kind of determine the audit test to be performed. So that's what we do when we are looking at confirming a system. On the flow charting, how is the flow charting done? Also, or in short, what is how do you design a flow chart, or how do you design flow charts? There are certain basic principles that need to be of guide or of relevance in this particular activity, where we say flow charts must be kept simple and clear, and the following points should be taken on board. One, there should be conformity of symbols with each symbol representing one thing. So this will actually avoid confusion. There should be symbols that are standardized to represent a particular activity, action, or movement direction, and so on and so forth. Secondly, there should be a show of a key of these symbols to be used, so that the person who are going to apply these symbols in a particular organization will use symbols without confusing others, which are standardized, so that everyone understands what the system is all about. So the third one is that the direction of the chart should be from bottom, from top to bottom, and from left to right. That is the standard practice which are supposed to be followed universally. Okay, so that's how we design flow charts. Then fourthly, make sure that there are no loose ends. Okay, because the loose end reflects a dead end, which does not show continuity, okay, in that particular direction. So avoid having loose ends. Fifth point is to consider is that the main flow should finish at the bottom right hand corner. Again, that is the international accepted standard practice. So the main flow should finish at the bottom right hand corner. And then lastly, connecting lines should only cross where absolutely necessary in order to keep the chart simple. If we have a number of crossing, the flow chart looks messed up, and it's actually difficult to understand how documents flow or what that particular flow chart is representing. So you have to put the crossings to the bare minimum to ensure that the chart reflects the information that it's designed to show. So that's what can be considered under flow charting. That's what can be considered under flow charting as best practices to be followed when designing a flow chart. So I thought of looking at some of the symbols that you may like or which you are going to be confronted with as you look at various kind of flow charts. So you have the first one which shows you a sales invoice, okay, in that manner, and the other one which has got this N slash e.g. delivery note. So which that N in the corner is just reflective of the fact that this particular document is serially numbered to help the cross-checkings or referencing, okay? Then the third one is showing a three-part document. So for instance, if you are talking about good received note, it can be a three-part document with the original, and then you have a duplicate and triplicate. Okay. Then you also have a sales ledger, the next one, which shows like that as a symbol, and the next symbol, which is a triangle with A or N inside. A represents alphabetical order, N represents numerical order, where you have TN to represent temporary numerical order. So those are the symbols when you look at accounting systems that you can be confronted with in your course of duty. We also have this particular cross that shows an operation, but not a check. It signifies that is an operation, not a check. Then we have the one which is in form of a diamond shape. That is a check function. That what you are looking at is a check function. Then we have the node which is got a 3 inside. It simply shows that that's a connector to the next page, probably, or connects that particular information to in the flow chart to page 3. Okay, so of the flow chart. So that's what it is. Then a continuous line arrow that shows a document flow between departments, whereas a broken line arrow shows information flow often transferred from one document to another. So those are some of the symbols, standard symbols you are likely to find entities using. We also look at what are the elements of an effective internal control system. Okay, so when an auditor is looking at an internal control system, for an internal control system to be reliable, there are certain features which are expected to be found in that system. These can be taken to be elements of an effective control system, which are summed up as control environment, risk assessment process, information and communication. We also have control activities. We also have monitoring of controls. Okay, monitoring of controls. For the purpose of easy remembering or recalling of these 5 elements of an effective internal control system, you can use a mnemonic, which is the letter or the word crime. The word crime, which has 5 letters, CRIME, to present what I've just mentioned. So that is a mnemonic to make it easy for you to remember the 5 elements of internal control system, crime. So what about this crime? Okay. So first of all, we look at what we can take as a control environment. Okay. Control environment actually establishes the overall attitude, awareness, and the actions of board of directors. Okay. management, owners, employees, as well as others concerning the importance of control and its emphasis in the entity. So that's what we look at as control environment. So when you look at control environment, it plays a very pivotal role in ensuring that internal controls are effective. So you can have all types of internal controls put in place, but if the control environment is toxic or is not appropriate, it does water down the effectiveness of internal control. So it is important to have in place an effective control or suitable control environment in which other controls can thrive. Imagine you have put controls in place, but management attitude is kind of that of laissez-faire attitude, or they don't care attitude. So you find that it might not work despite you having elaborate internal control. Management has no respect for them. Okay, they don't consider them important. That's their attitude. So you find that it's difficult for those type of internal control to be operationalized to their effectiveness. Also, if management is not aware or is not knowledgeable of certain facts, again, it becomes very difficult for internal controls to effectively be carried out or to do their job. Okay, so even the appropriate action, if the internal controls are put in place but it lacks appropriate action to be executed by those charged with governance and management, again it makes the environment very toxic for these internal controls to thrive properly. So that's why control environment is important. So it is expected that if you are going to expect an effective internal control system, there should be good control environment existing. Let's look at the next one, which is entity's risk assessment process. Okay, the risk assessment process is the responsibility of management, not that of an auditor. Okay, it involves entities' identification or location, evaluation, and the management of risk. So that's what we look at when you're looking at entity risk assessment process. Why is it important? If you are going to carry out risk assessment process, you are going to, in the process, identify what are the consequences of something going wrong, and if you look at the gravity of that particular result, you might address it by putting in place appropriate control actions. Okay, control actions, so that is mitigated or eliminated or prevented from happening. So that's why we need to have risk assessment process. Okay, so we also look at the third one, which is information system. The information system and communication, as in most literatures put it, does have reference to identification, retention, and transfer of information in a timely manner, enabling personnel to execute their responsibilities. So that's what happens. Now, if you look at an internal control system where information is delayed to reach a particular point where it is required, means that appropriate action also may be delayed, leading to maybe material losses, okay, happening in that particular organization. Okay, for instance, let me look at a particular aspect where management is not fed with information in time, and then there is maybe something which is progressively having a bad effect on the production process, and then the person who is supposed to effect action to prevent further degeneration of the situation is not informed in good time. What will happen in that particular case is you see that that particular plant might break down, and then the company will suffer a significant amount of lost productive hours, and ultimately it affects the bottom line, which is the profitability of the company. So because of lack of timely information, that particular unfortunate situation could have not been prevented. So we need information system that is able to be transferred in a timely manner to a responsible person to take appropriate action to prevent loss. Okay, for instance. So we look at the fourth one, which is control activities. Okay, we look at the fourth one, which is control activities. Now, control activities relate to policies and procedures established to provide reasonable assurance. Policies and procedures established to provide reasonable assurance that management decisions are executed, providing for actions to address risks to attainment of objectives. So that's what we look at when we look at control activities. Now, these control activities can be all these procedures which can be summed up in a number of activities like separation of responsibility or duties. We have physical restriction. Okay, we can have also arithmetic accuracy and accounting. We can also look at management actions. We can also look at how supervision is supposed to be done. We also look at organization structure. Okay, we also look at approvals, authentication of activities, and also the kind of personnel that are in place. So these are some of the activities that can fall under control activities. Okay, so we're going to look at that later on. So we look at also the aspect of monitoring and control. Okay, monitoring and control. This is another attribute that you want to find in an effective internal control system. Under monitoring, you are looking at this being a process that evaluates the quality of internal controls, okay, and design, okay, evaluates the quality of internal control, design particularly, and execution and its execution over time. So that's what monitoring is all about. It also includes initiation of appropriate control action if need be, okay, or corrective action if need be. So that's what comes out of monitoring. And furthermore, this process is through separate evaluation or ongoing activities. Okay, so when you look at monitoring, basically you look at monitoring as something that is done on a continuous basis, so that periodically when you stop over to look at what information you are getting out of monitoring, you might take an evaluation, assess the materiality of those particular changes that are arising from your operation or operating system, and decide whether to take action or not. So after evaluation, you can take action or not take action, depending on how material that particular departure is, or how material that particular item of information is to the prosperity and continuity of the business. So that's how you look at monitoring. Okay, That's how you look at monitoring. So these are the 5 elements of an effective internal control system. You need to have them in a system for you to place reliance on that particular system. To place reliance on that particular system as a system that is capable of producing credible information. Okay, so that's what you do. We look at also internal controls in accounting process. Okay. In the internal control in accounting process, we require or will ensure that those strong internal control in accounting process will ensure that transactions are authorized by management. Okay. Secondly, all transactions and other events are recorded completely, accurately, and are authentic or are valid. Okay. So at the correct amount, correct account, and the proper accounting period. So that's how it is. Then also internal controls in accounting process will assist to ensure access to assets and record is restricted to authorized personnel. Okay, so that's how it is. You'll find that one of the internal controls into accounting system could be use of passwords. Okay. When you look at accessing files, you cannot access files unless you have the correct password. Okay. Also, when you look at accounting department, the way it is designed, if you're looking at the cashier, normally a cashier is placed in a very secure place, and access to that particular room or office or space is restricted. Okay. That's how it is done. Okay. So it is restricted. Okay, to that particular entry, okay, of that particular space. We also have internal controls in accounting process where we see recorded assets are compared with existing ones regularly and differences followed up. Okay, so normally you find internal controls by responsible officers being carried out to ensure that they establish the existence, not only existence, it helps them to assess whether the asset is recorded at the correct carrying amount, because the physical inspection can actually review whether there is physical deterioration or not. Okay, so that's how important it is. That's how important it is. So as I said earlier on, there are certain examples that we can attribute to control activities. We have spam SOP, that is again another mnemonic that you need to master to remember some of the control activities as segregation of duties. When you talk about segregation of duties, this is a management responsibility to ensure that no particular transaction is processed 100% by one person. So the procedure of processing a transaction is shared by different people. Normally we look at this particular aspect by reference to what I can call a golden triangle. A golden triangle is got two aspects at every vertex of the triangle. One is the authorization function. The other vertex is got the custodial function. The other one is got the recording function. So meaning that when you look at a particular activity, it has to go through these three pivotal activities or functions, okay, for it to be processed thoroughly or completely rather. So you find that the person who is going to approve that should be different from the person who is going to put those particular transactions into the records of account, and also should be different from the person who is going to keep or dispatch these particular assets of the entity. So if you keep these particular functions separate, you are creating an environment where internal control internal control is actually going to be made possible by internal check. An internal check is where the system is able to check itself, okay, to be in a position to prevent, detect, and correct any material misstatements and errors if they occur on a timely basis. So that's what it does. So the other one is physical controls. These can be taken to be physical restrictions where you can have records of business not accessed by unauthorized persons by way of putting passwords, which are supposed to be changed regularly. Okay, and also sometimes you have physical restriction by way of perimeter offense or lock and key. So these are supposed to be in place to prevent or to safeguard the assets and records of business. Then also there is the aspect of authorization. So for every transaction, for any activity to happen in an organization, there should be a responsible person who is supposed to approve that particular activity. That person is accountable for those for that particular area, so that make sure that whatever approves, he is satisfied that everything is regular about that particular transaction. Okay. Then we also have management. Management are supposed to be the people who are supposed to craft policies, okay, which are guiding principles of how procedures and processes are going to be carried out to ensure that the established objectives are achieved of that particular entity. We also need to have supervision as another control activity. Every employee should be adequately supervised. Every employee should be adequately supervised. This facilitates timely detection and correction of errors and misstatements which might occur. Then also we have organization. The organization structure is important to be understood so that we understand the information flow. Okay, this also facilitates in the information and communication, which we have already talked about under the 5 elements of an effective control system. So if you don't know the organization structure or you don't know the lines of command, you might not know which person is responsible to take an appropriate action on a timely basis. So that can worsen the situation. So there is need to have a proper and elaborate organization chart or lines of command. Okay. Then we also have arithmetic accuracy and accounting. So normally through, for instance, bank reconciliation statements or using an internal auditor to go through the calculations that have been carried out in a particular transaction, it helps to actually detect or correct errors on a timely basis. So that's what we need to find under control activities. Then also we need to look at performance reviews. Okay, performance reviews. So this helps us to identify persons in certain key places and assess whether we have the right people at the right time in the right offices, so that the correct things are done. So we need the right qualification and experience in terms of staff to man position in an organization to reduce on errors and misstatements. So these are the control activities or actions that we expect management to be performing or to carry out. Okay, so that's what I wanted to shed light on. Yeah. Then we look at what are the responsibilities relating to internal audit by management and auditors. It's important to understand that management's responsibility is to set up a system of controls appropriate to the enterprise. They are the ones who have been employed to run the business. So it's part of their responsibility to make sure the business is run properly. And for them to run properly, they need to put up appropriate internal controls on the part of the external auditor. It is responsible for the internal auditor to obtain an understanding of internal control relevant to the audit. Okay, if the internal auditor is able to appreciate or understand what type of internal control an entity has put in place, they're able to make an assessment of the risk of material misstatements that can take place in that particular environment. Okay, and they also design appropriate audit procedure as a response to this risk. For instance, if you look at internal controls and you evaluate them as non-existent or indeed very weak, okay, then the auditor might not place reliance on them. Then he might go for substantive audit procedures, which are a detailed vouching of the system to gather audit evidence. Okay, and if you find that the internal control is on the first assessment is said to be strong, then you just need to carry out tests of controls to find out whether indeed those controls which you are saying are existing are actually working and effectively and throughout the accounting system. Okay, so that's what the internal auditor does. So depending on whether the internal controls are assessed to be strong, the strategy to carry out an audit can change. It can either be that of substantive audit procedures or control of test of controls in carrying out those particular audit procedures. So that's what happens in this particular case. So as it relates to responsibility relating to internal controls by management and auditors. So that's what I had for you. Thank you for listening. Please remember to subscribe to my channel and like my videos. See you next time when we look at another interesting topic in auditing.